All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Sovereign Sphere. I'm Carla Treadway, and I have with me today Billboard Chris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Carla. Good to talk to you. We got a lot to talk about as always.
We have a lot. You know what? 2026 is it's not boring so far. Definitely not boring. There's plenty of content to work with. I will say that.
Yes, I don't think we're ever going to have a shortage because we're going to see more change in the rest of our lives than we've already seen up to this point in our lives, which seems impossible. But technology keeps going and we're entering the AI revolution. So the world's about to change a whole lot more.
The strangest thing about all of it is, we're going to talk about some facts, maybe a little data in here today, but it's funny because I feel like a lot of the issues we're going to talk to today, I feel like you don't need to back it with evidence and science. Like your gut, your common sense should be able to show you that this is not a normal world that we're living in. These are not normal circumstances. The things that we're doing to people aren't normal. People aren't normal. I mean, what does normal mean? But maybe the better question is what we're doing as a society beneficial? And I think there's those of us that have a really strong inner compass and can see, oh, these things are clearly wrong. And we're going to get into it today. But it seems like everything really got flipped around 2020.
Yeah, I'd say this has been going on since the dawn of man. To be honest with you, we've always done crazy things. We've had moments where we've gotten better, but psychologically, we're the same as we've always been. And humans have always been prone to doing terrible things. There have always been bad things going on in the world, but there's always been beautiful things going on as well. The problem really happening right now is in the West, we've had a few particularly crazy mind viruses, and with the advent of social media and the smartphone, that has really accelerated the issue for people who might have already been prone to mental health disorders. It's not been good for them. It's not been good for kids. It's been extremely harmful for kids to grow up online. And so we have some unique challenges that we're facing today. And I think the craziest one, perhaps that the world's ever seen on this scale, is this business of trying to change the sex of children with puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries.
Tell us about your name. Where did Billboard Chris come from?
So I didn't give myself that nickname. You're not supposed to do that. I put up a billboard, actual billboard, on the side of the street in Vancouver that said, "I love J.K. Rowling." I was following the lead of a woman in the UK who put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, "I heart J.K. Rowling." And she put that up because J.K. has spoken out about the harms of gender ideology, about the medical abuse being perpetrated amongst our kids, and about the total destruction of women's rights. Because when you bring along this ideology that teaches we have a gender identity that might be different than our sex, and that your gender identity just comes down to a feeling, and anyone can say that they are a woman or a man, well, particularly for women who are more vulnerable to men who are perhaps struggling with a condition called autogynephilia, where they literally get aroused by the idea of being a woman. They have this paraphilia, or a sexual perversion, where they get off by dressing as a woman and going into women's spaces. Well, as soon as any man can be a woman, that's the elimination of women as a class. Mm-hmm. And the protections afforded to them are not then available. So J.K. Rowling, lifelong feminist, she's one of the few feminists who actually knows what a woman is these days, and she spoke out against this. So this woman put up a sign saying, "I love J.K. Rowling." It lasted a day because that was deemed to be hate speech. And I got tired of our freedom of speech coming under attack, so I put up a huge billboard leading into downtown Vancouver that said the same thing. It also lasted just a day because Sarah Kirby-Young, a Vancouver City Councillor, said it was hate speech, and she pressured this sign company to take it down. And being rather obstinate and determined, I decided I'm not going to let them silence me that easily. So a week later, I had a big billboard up in San Francisco, and then Los Angeles, Portland, all throughout Utah, all throughout the metro in Washington, D.C., and then Times Square. That was all in September of 2020. All those billboards in the United States stayed up. I saw some comment on some YouTube video where someone called me Billboard Chris, and I thought, that's a good name. Let's just change my profile name to that. And then I became a billboard. I became a human walking, talking billboard, which was actually much more effective than all these expensive billboards because there's a person behind it. And it helps to breathe courage into other people. And even though I look kind of ridiculous, human sandwich board men are not normally the most reliable individuals on the planet. But I'm still amazed to this day how much respect I get because people know how crazy this is and they respect that I'm out there with a true message. It's not a hateful message. It's not a provocative message. My main message on my sign on my front says children cannot consent to puberty blockers, which has been repeated by the High Court in England, and it's just the most common sense thing ever. 10-year-old children cannot consent to sterilizing themselves and turning themselves into lifelong pharmaceutical patients.
And so far, you've had more than 30,000 conversations. You've spoken about this to, I don't know, more than 120 countries.
Sorry, 13, 14 countries. Yeah.
13, 14 countries.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry,
Yeah, 120
cities.
would be a lot.
13, 14 countries. What's the biggest mission here?
Well, we're going to stop this child abuse. We're going to permanently end pediatric medical transition, the practice of giving children puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and doing surgeries on them, primarily double mastectomies that are being done on kids. But we can't just stop when they're 18 because it shouldn't be getting done to 18 and 19-year-olds either. But the first mission is the kids. All these 18 and 19-year-olds have been indoctrinated into this as children. They all have other mental health comorbidities going on or have suffered abuse or trauma. Sexual abuse is common in a majority of these cases. Autism is prevalent in tons of these cases. I would say it's easily a majority. But we know statistically from the Tavistock in England that 35% of the kids, out of a sample of 1,069 patients, 35% had moderate to severe autism. They're even transitioning non-verbal autistic children, saying that they can identify their gender identity by drawing it in a picture. And they'll still sterilize those kids. This is a cult. This is a whole lot of true believers all over the world who've been indoctrinated online, in school now with our youngest generation, and through academia. And it's not just that we have surgeons making money or these doctors in these hospitals making money. That's the simple answer that a lot of people want to go to right away. But these are true believers, and these doctors could do anything to make a lot of money. They're choosing to do this because they believe in it. And if people want to blame money, which is a fine thing to blame, the real problem with money in this situation is not how much money the doctors are making. It's the money pushing this ideology into society from NGOs and from leftist governments. Because governments have funded NGOs, which then spend tens of billions of dollars worldwide pushing this. This was formerly done through the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. It's been done by Canada. We've sent more than $12 billion even overseas to push gender ideology in other countries. And it's in academia, and there are grants available for anyone who writes a book or produces a TV show pushing trans ideology. So there's just tons of money behind it. And we have no money behind us. I have no money at all, but we have the truth. And the truth eventually will defeat this propaganda.
I've actually interviewed on the show 3 different trans individuals from the Gays Against Groomers community, Buck Angel and Sarah Higgins and Matt Ray. And every single one of them has said the same thing. They have first stated, I have a mental illness. I know I'm not actually the opposite sex. And the only reason why I'm okay now as an adult is that I had real therapy growing up, that I never took drugs as a child. Nothing ever happened to me as a kid. And even as an adult, things are not perfect. And these are all the pharmaceuticals that I take every single day for my mental health condition. And these are individuals that are doing well compared to a lot of things that we're seeing online here. And I'm just bringing us back to that because when people say, like, of the transgender community, 54% have a mental health condition, the truth is 100% do. And the narrative that's going around is that this is natural, normal, that is a totally natural phenomenon to be born in the wrong body, which just actually doesn't make any sense. And at least these individuals are, acknowledging this is a health condition.
So from time to time, I I want to politely push back on some terminology that has become accepted. There's no such thing as a trans person. Buck Angel is not a trans person. Sarah Higdon is not a trans person. Buck Angel is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am a stickler about this, and it probably annoys some people, and that's fine. Because language is so important. As soon as we acknowledge that there are transgender people, that there is a transgender community, we're giving legitimacy to this claim. And they're not. No one can even define what transgender means. If you ask them, what does it mean? They normally will just fumble around. They might come up with like a dictionary definition, according to the activists, which is someone whose gender identity is separate from their sex. Well, gender identity is made up. It doesn't exist. We have personalities. That's all gender identity means. If you ask them to define gender identity, they can't do it. They'll say, well, it's someone's gender that's different than their sex. So now we come down to this root word. What is gender? We used it as a synonym for sex most of our lives. The left treats gender as something totally separate from sex, yet they can't define it. All it comes down to are stereotypes. So if a woman is more masculine, like Buck Angel, well, we're now supposed to say that that person has a different gender? No, she's just a masculine woman. And Buck is actually responsible for a lot of people transitioning because she popularized this, and she pushes porn and she sells sex toys so that women who have transitioned can still do things. And so I'm not at all supportive of what Buck is doing. She needs to stop all of that behavior because it's not helpful. But yeah, they're not trans. They're just women or men. And yes, they have probably a variety of mental health comorbidities because, as we know from England, from the Cass review that was done by Dr. Hilary Cass, 70% of these children had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities. Never mind the sexual abuse. The parents of these kids were 10 times more likely to be sex offenders. An older study shows the moms of these boys are, in 52% of cases, themselves had borderline personality disorder. Kids in state care are way overrepresented. So it's just all these struggling kids. And this whole idea that we have a gender separate from our sex is pseudoscientific, quasi-religious nonsense that we need to eliminate at its source.
I mean, when they teach these things in school, and the things that they'll teach are that this exists, right? Some people are gender fluid or non-binary. Here's all the things that exist. But the kickback that I've always given the school is they never bring in all of this information. They don't bring in comorbidities. They don't bring in the stats of people's mental health after they transition. They are not giving any of that information for kids. They're just saying it's natural, it's normal, anyone can do it, and that's it. That's the conversation that Canadian schools are giving to kids.
Yeah, not just that. So first of all, with the school thing, there's a lot of misinformation about this. Not all teachers are pushing this at all. No one's holding a gun to a teacher's head. No one is standing in a teacher's classroom during the day making them teach a certain thing about gender identity. A lot of teachers never teach it. A lot of teachers disagree with it. But the teachers who do like it, and the activist teachers among the ranks of teachers, and there are many, yes, they're going to push this. They have autonomy to teach it if they want to. And I hear a lot of people in BC say we need to get rid of SOGI 123, which was the name of this program funded by the BC government, funded by some banks as well, who I think RBC donated 200 grand, TD Bank donated 200 grand. And this came into place after our Human Rights Code changed to include gender identity in the Human Rights Code in 2016, which is a problem. They need to take gender identity out of all these codes. But even if your teacher isn't pushing gender ideology, what happens is during Sex Education Week in our elementary schools, they might bring in a third-party company. And here in BC, it's normally a company called Salima Noon, named after its founder. And they will come in with the most radical people. They will bring trans-identified people into the school to talk to kids from grades 4 to 7. And they're talking about masturbation. They're talking about anal sex. They're talking about oral sex. They are destroying children's innocence at this moment when they know nothing about it. And even though you think you have a good teacher, you have to worry about these third-party companies. So what I tell every parent is at the beginning of the year, you should be talking to your teacher, finding out where they stand on this issue, and you should make it very clear that you want to know when there's going to be sex education done in the school, because you should be pulling your kids out on those days. Mm-hmm. Now, excuse me 1 second. My cat is making noise, and I'm going to get rid of her. You are distracting me. Sorry about that. I didn't know
That's
she
okay.
was still in
I have
here.
to leave my door open for the same reason. I have a little blind bulldog and he cries outside the door if I don't leave it open for him, but then he comes in here and snorts and same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there not anything in the government mandated curriculum that touches on these issues? Because
So the government
my
doesn't.
schools are saying that there is something, because when I've given them kickback, they say it's in the curriculum, we have to, especially the sex ed curriculum.
There are no fixed materials that teachers ever use for anything. There's no
Interesting.
set textbooks. There's no set lesson plans. This program that the government helped fund in BC recommended some lesson plans, but those are just recommendations. There's
Even
absolutely
to
no requirement to teach anything particularly about gender ideology.
see, this is very interesting to me because the teachers that I've given kickback to, this is what they were telling me. I don't want to, but this is what we have to. And so I'm in Ontario. Maybe it's different in Ontario too. We've been in the public school and then also the Catholic school, which surprisingly enough is also public, a government curriculum. And both schools have at one point taught this and have told me this is government mandated. Maybe that was just their out. But what was really interesting about the Catholic school is they also use the Bible to justify it, using this weird twisted version of Genesis to say actually this is what God always intended, and they got a lot of kickback from me.
The Catholics are really missing the boat on this issue. No, they are not. No one is forcing any of these parents in Canada.
Mhm.
No one is forcing any of these teachers to teach that you might be born in the wrong body, period. There's no one standing in their classroom. Teachers all teach differently. They all download things from the internet and push whatever unit they want to. So, no, there's not mandated units on gender ideology happening. Now, during Sex Education Week, depending on the school, some years it'll happen, some years it won't. Some years at my kids' elementary school, they're both in high school now, but some years they paid $2,000 or $3,000 for Salima Noon to bring in some of these activists to teach sex ed to the kids. And they had a school assembly even, where they had trans-identified people speaking to all the kids from grades 4 to 7. Other years that didn't happen. So it depends. Depends on the pack. Depends on the principal. Depends on the teacher. But if I was a teacher, there's no way you're going to make me teach this. It's not happening. And I know lots of teachers who never touch this.
This was really great news for me because they told me something false, and then I was feeling for their situation, thinking that it was mandated. I still don't support it, and they're still going to get kickback from me. But knowing that this isn't mandated at all, and it's just them, I'm coming for them.
Yeah, it might be somewhere saying, we should teach about gender identity. Look, all they need to say is they don't even need to address it. It'll never come up. But you give what is a Christian message, which, you know what, we're going to love everybody.
Yeah.
That's it. And some people are different than us, and we're going to love them.
Yep.
And that's essentially how gender identity was originally presented. They use anti-bullying to get these ideologies into the schools because they know everyone's against bullying. Mm-hmm. They do this with our dumb politicians. And they are dumb. I don't like using words like that, but they're very dumb. They all voted for Bill C-16, which made it a part of Canada's criminal code and human rights code that you can't discriminate against someone on the basis of their gender identity. And all the politicians go, yeah, let's not discriminate. Discrimination is bad. Hold up. Think for more than 5 seconds here, Mr. Politician. What are you actually doing? You're saying now that we can't discriminate against men going into women's spaces. You're saying we can't discriminate against men claiming that they are women and going into women's prisons. Now men go into women's rape shelters. Now they're going into women's sports. Of course we discriminate based on sex. Otherwise there are no protections for women and for girls. So of course we discriminate based on sex, but all of our human rights code in municipalities and cities, in provinces, and federally, they all recognize gender identity. All of our laws, all of our regulations, all of our medical schools, all of academia, the entire judiciary, gender identity is now entrenched in every single institution you can think of across Canada. So it's going to take a long time to undo this, because every time you gain an inch, they cry murder. And we saw with Danielle Smith, who banned child transition in Alberta for kids just under the age of 16. She should have gone higher. I'm told she would have, but that people in her own caucus didn't want her to. It's embarrassing. But it should have been higher. But even though it was only for kids under 16, no surgeries, no puberty blockers, no hormones, the media went wild. The politicians on the other side cry foul, and the activists lose their minds. And even then, a judge stopped it. A judge blocked that bill. So she was forced to invoke the notwithstanding clause. Thankfully, we have that in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So for those who don't know, in our Constitution, our Charter, basically there's this clause that says we shouldn't be ruled by judges. So if 90% of the population, for example, voted for a politician who then put some policy into place, like banning the sterilization of children, you shouldn't then have a judge who's an activist come along and say, I'm blocking that bill. Because we shouldn't have judges ruling our society, acting essentially as dictators. So the notwithstanding clause enables any premier or the prime minister to overrule these judges for a period of 5 years. And that's what Danielle Smith was forced to do. And that's what we'll be forced to do on any legislation that we pass, whether it's getting gender identity completely out of schools, because we need to ban it. There should never be gender identity instruction in schools, period. K to 12. Gender identities don't exist. This is a cultish thing going on. This is essentially a religion. It's not based in science. It's a belief system. And we don't force belief systems onto children. We don't teach them as though they're reality, and that's what they're doing. So the whole thing needs to be banned. But anyone who tries to do that is going to have it blocked by a judge. So thankfully we have the notwithstanding clause, and we need to keep it.
Well, and there's so obviously a social contagion element to it. My kids were just saying today, you should see our school and the amount of kids that are they thems, are unsure about their gender. Do you believe that there is a social contagion element to this?
It's 100% a social contagion. It's entirely what it is. It's all it is. It's how it spread. And it spread primarily among girls, who are always historically more prone to social contagions. And with this one in particular, it's preying on the kids who don't feel like they fit in. And it's preying on girls who are having a tough time in puberty, girls who've been sexually abused, girls who don't feel pretty, and who have other things going on. And it spreads from child to child. That's why you get families where each of the kids in this family, they all say they're trans or non-binary now. And it is becoming less popular because we are making it uncool with the teenage segment. And that's honestly probably the most important thing we can do at this point, especially in Canada, where politicians are so averse to change for the better. We just have to keep educating people about this so they understand how truly regressive and backwards and awful it is. And it has to become deeply unpopular with the kids. Because the way they push this also throughout our school system is they do make this about anti-bullying. And of course, we shouldn't bully anyone. But it created this culture of fear that we can't even talk about this issue. And that's changing. I get teenagers coming up to me on the street all the time, fully supportive of what I'm doing and statistically, from some surveys, we can tell that it is becoming much less popular among the kids. But the problem remains that this is pushed systemically, institutionally throughout society. So until we get it out of schools and academia, it's always going to be there. This isn't a fad like bell bottoms or haircuts. This is something pushed with billions of dollars behind it. And all these institutions and leftist governments are still going to keep doing it.
Well, it's way beyond anti-bullying. It's an elevated status. And I almost laugh every time I see one of the rainbow flags that says like "You are welcome here," and it's like Mark's Work Wearhouse or Shoppers Drug Mart, and I think to myself, were you hauling trans people out of your store before? Were you beating them up and dragging them? Like that's never happened. That's never happened. Like anyone can shop. That's actually always been the case. No one has been dragged out of here. And if you were beating people up and dragging them out, you should probably go to jail. But those things weren't happening.
There's virtually no oppression of trans-identified people, period.
No.
They have all these different holidays. They have their Transgender Day of Visibility and Transgender Day of Remembrance, whatever it's called. Apparently for all the people murdered. They're the ones murdering people. They're the ones hurting people. They're the ones attacking people. We have this whole trans Tifa thing going on where they commit violence as a matter of normalcy. This is how they try to silence you. They have justified violence by saying that you're trying to genocide an entire people. But when you look at the actual murder rate of trans-identified people, it's much lower than even just the general population. And then when you dig into each individual murder that's ever occurred, it's normally someone like their lover, their spouse, or it's a police officer killing them in the act of committing a crime. The actual cases where you could perhaps attribute it to so-called transphobia are in the single digits. Yet every week we have now someone being killed seemingly by some trans-identified person. Maybe not every week, but when you look at the overall numbers, they're killing dozens of people. Mm-hmm. They just beat a man to death in France who was standing up as security for feminists speaking out about this. We just had 8 or 9 people killed 2 weeks ago in British Columbia by an individual who had a variety of mental illnesses, who was on tons of drugs, Jesse Strang, or Jesse Van Rootselaar. It's interesting that the media and the police use the surname Van Rootselaar, which is a name he's never gone by. That's his father's name, but he's always gone by Jesse Strang. But by calling him Van Rootselaar, they essentially bury his online profile. Because if you search for Jesse Van Rootselaar, you're not going to find anything. If you search Jesse Strang, you're going to find all this crazy stuff. You're going to find how he was even made a video game where he shot up a mall. And this should have been known to police, who had made several visits to this guy's home. But he was taking antipsychotics, antidepressants, ketamine, DMT, mushrooms, weed, out of his mind, dropped out of school, I think, when he was 12. Tons of mental health problems. Police knew about it all, yet they returned guns to the home, and he just killed how many people? 7, 8?
Yeah.
Little 12-year-old Maya is sitting in hospital right now fighting for her life.
She just
having had a
woke
bullet.
up. Just woke up.
Is she actually conscious, or is her eye just open?
I saw her eyes were open. She was watching her favorite show, and that's about the extent that I know of it.
I saw that, but the mom said it seems like she's watching her show. I think her eye might just be open, but I'm not really sure. Anyway, she's in an awful state.
Shooting, and then I looked at what the CBC said immediately after, and then I was trying to look into the data, and it is all pretty muddled. So, CBC was saying the stats aren't this, that 97.5 are of shootings are by cisgender men, 2% by cisgender women, 0.5% by trans people. This is the CBC, and we know about how far we can trust them. But
so here's what they do with these statistics.
yeah,
They call every gang shooting in Chicago a mass shooting. They call every time that there's criminal activity and there's gang activity somewhere, they call all those mass shootings, and they'll say that there are thousands of mass shootings. No, there aren't. Look at the school shootings that have been done in the past few years. And a huge percentage of them have been by trans-identified people, including females. And females never do this. Why are they doing this? Well, giving them testosterone is not a good idea. That makes them much more aggressive. They're on a whole bunch of other drugs as well. I mean, just from the last 10 mass school shootings we've had, half of them are trans-identified people. And the
They
only
are.
school shooting in Canadian history that's ever killed more than one child, previously there was a school shooting that killed a 17-year-old and injured another. This is the only one where they've targeted little kids ever in Canadian history. And it's this trans-identified individual. And they'd returned guns to the home, knowing how mentally ill he was. And I wonder if we treated trans identification as the mental illness that it is, instead of affirming it and calling it beautiful, would they have returned the guns to that home? That's my question.
Well, I have a poster up right in front of me right now, and it's the 9 of the latest school shootings in the U.S. that where the shooter was trans. And just with that example of CBC changing the name, and in most of the reporting too, they refused to say it was a trans shooter. How much of like the accurate data is even coming out to begin with? But what we do know to be true, like you said about females on testosterone, is that has a huge increase in violent crime. And then if you add in SSRIs, a 26% increase in violent crime and rising to 35% if they're between the ages of 15 to 24. And that almost all of these kids are also on other medications. So the hormones plus SSRIs. And the fact that like after the shooting, the immediate response of CBC is, how dare conservatives, and they would point to that, conservative pundits mention anything about trans. And at the very least, we should be able to have an honest conversation about what is the effect of testosterone and SSRI use on young people. Is there an increase in violence? Clearly there is, and the CBC won't even let us talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't care about CBC, CTV Global, all these guys. They're all liars.
Same.
They're propagandists. They're irrelevant. I reach more people than all of them on my own. I talked to City News this weekend because I had a town hall with Dallas Brody from 1BC. We had 600 people there. City News
Amazing.
clipped one tiny segment of my interview, and then they spent 2/3 of the segment talking to some man who identifies as a woman across the street. They're just propagandists.
I
And
just found exactly what you were
it is what it
talking
is.
about too. So it says about them hiding that and skewing those numbers with gang-related violence and mass shootings. It says,
Yeah, yeah.
so despite making up less than 1% of the population, trans individuals account for roughly 40% of successful and would-be school shooters since 2020. This is from the Western Journal. So it says that trans individuals are widely overrepresented, and this is important, in non-gang related mass shootings. So that's where they try and bury the data to say, no, this is rare, and it's way more likely to be white cisgender men.
That's right. Well, cisgender. So
I
first,
know.
nobody's
That
cisgender,
word.
nobody's transgender. I can't believe Western Standard is using that word. They
The Western Journal. Yeah.
well, they need to do better because
Yes,
they shouldn't use the language of these activists.
I
This is
agree.
a cult, and don't use their language.
I
That's
agree.
how you give legitimacy to this whole thing. Going along with pronouns. People say, Chris, what's the big deal with going along with pronouns? Well, you're lying, first of all. So just don't lie.
Well, and
Men
it's
aren't
step
she, her.
one. It's step one of a process. And
Of
this is
course.
something I wanted to ask you about the difference between we're in Canada, the difference between the state's pathways and Canada's pathways. Can you tell us about the Kaya Clementine Breen story and whether or not you think that that pathway, starting off with pronouns, could also happen in Canada just as easily?
Sorry, which story?
Uh, Kaya Clementine Bree. She was at the
Oh,
LA
her name's
Children's
not
Hospital.
Kaya. Her name's just Clementine. Yeah.
Okay. This came up extra.
So Clementine is a typical case. This is a young woman I ran into at UCLA when I was there in October of 2024. And I just went to UCLA. It's a University of California, Los Angeles, just to do my thing. I talked to students. I set up my tripod on campus and I hang out. And if people want to come and talk to me, I talk. That's all I ever do. And this young woman came up to me. I'd only been there a few minutes. Her name's Clementine. And when she was 7 years old, she'd suffered sexual abuse. Not just a one-time thing. I don't know all the details. I'm not going to ask her because it's not my business. But as a little girl, she was sexually abused. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that that might make her not love being a girl. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't her gender identity that caused the greatest trauma of her life. It was her sex. It was being female. Mm-hmm. And so at the age of 12, she was seeing a school counselor. And because she wasn't loving and looking forward to developing into a woman, which for her was the source of all this trauma, being female, to the school counselor, that meant that she was trans. So they socially transitioned her at school with a new name and pronouns, and the school counselor told her parents that your daughter is transgender. And parents, knowing nothing about this, they're talking to this school counselor who's supposed to be somewhat of an expert on these matters. The parents did what a lot of parents do, and they went to see the actual medical expert at the gender clinic at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. This is a woman named Johanna Olsen Kennedy. And in the very first appointment, Clementine was separated from her parents, and in half an hour, she was prescribed puberty blockers at the age of 12.
Half an hour.
Johanna Olsen Kennedy knew nothing about her. She didn't even ask about the sexual abuse. She knows nothing. I know you longer than she knew Clementine, Carla. We've been talking for 40 minutes. And I still know nothing about you, really. But here she is, now stopping the development of a child she just met. Separately, on the same appointment, when she was speaking to the parents, she told them that they could have a dead daughter or a live son. This was life and death. They better stop her puberty or she's going to kill herself. Literally, she used those words, dead daughter or live son. This is their script. All across the world, these gender clinicians use that script because the only way you can justify this child abuse is to say that kids will die if you don't do it. At 13, she put her on testosterone. At 14, Clementine got a double mastectomy by Dr. Scott Mosser in San Francisco. Scott Mosser met her right before the surgery. He also knows nothing about her. She's just a piece of meat coming through the disassembly line for Scott Mosser because he doesn't care about these kids. And so anyway, you've now had a girl harmed for life. She never went through female puberty, actually. She was on testosterone, so of course she developed a deep voice. She's lost her breasts. At the age of 17, she developed psychosis from the testosterone. We were just talking about what does it cause? What harm does testosterone with these girls cause? They're getting teenaged boy levels of testosterone injected into them as females. Now, as males, we're meant to have testosterone. We were created or evolved to have testosterone in those levels. Women aren't. We have no idea what harm it is doing to their bodies. We have no idea what the lack of estrogen is doing to their bodies. Hormones go throughout every cell in our body. And now we're playing God with children's bodies, thinking we know better. We have 1 billion physiological processes going on every second. And now we're messing that up because of an idea that a child was born in the wrong body, something that nobody can define. This is child abuse. She developed this psychosis. Johanna Olsen Kennedy then wanted her to get a hysterectomy. She wanted to send this girl into teenaged menopause. That was too much. She was not having a good time. She stopped. At the age of 19, she then officially made the decision to detransition, to not call herself transgender anymore. You truly can't detransition because this damage is permanent. She will never be able to have a family of her own. She'll never be able to have kids of her own. She can adopt, of course. But they did all this to a girl who'd been sexually abused and who was just traumatized. And they never even asked her about it. I had a 6-7 minute conversation with her. I found out about it because I was actually concerned for this individual. These doctors aren't. So hers is the traditional story. I wish I could say this is some outlier, that this is some extremely awful scenario, but it's not. All the safeguards have vanished. They don't require therapy anymore for these kids. They might if they have other issues going on. It depends who they talk to, but it's not a requirement. And a lot of people will say that to even suggest therapy for a child identifying as trans is abusive. They think that's abusive because you're invalidating their gender identity. You're insinuating that there's something wrong with their gender identity by even mentioning that they might need therapy. So they don't do that anymore. In half the gender clinics in Canada, they're getting puberty blockers on the very first appointment. And so let's talk about what puberty blockers are, if I may continue to ramble here.
Please.
These are technically, for the doctors watching, these are gonadotropin releasing hormone analogs. They stop the pituitary gland from releasing two hormones called luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. These in turn are what trigger the beginning of puberty. It triggers the explosion of testosterone in boys and estrogen in girls, which in turn cause our secondary sex characteristics to develop. So girls grow breasts, they get wider hips. Boys, of course, we get stronger, broader shoulders, deep voice, hairy face, all that stuff. I don't need to explain what happens in puberty. They're stopping this happening with kids. They're stopping the development of children. If that doesn't make your jaw hit the floor, I would challenge that there perhaps might be something wrong with you. Because it should. We're stopping the development of children. Because they're told that they were born wrong. Mm-hmm. Is there anything more psychologically abusive even than telling a child they're born wrong, that they're supposed to be something they're not? You've got this struggling little boy or girl, this upset little boy or girl, and you tell them, well, the reason you're upset is because you were actually born in the wrong body. You're supposed to be something you're not.
Are doctors still telling parents that these are reversible?
Of course. So the first lie is that kids are going to kill themselves if we don't transition them. And the number two lie, and I'm not exaggerating when I say they say this every single time. The number two lie is that puberty blockers are reversible. That they just buy time for the child to explore their gender identity. This is the sales pitch. By the time a child ends up in a gender clinic, they are sold. They have been online for hours and hours and hours and hours in every case. They've gotten this in school perhaps, but they're always online. They've gotten it through maybe playing video games even. A young woman, 22 years old, came out and stood with me at the University of Washington one day. And when she was 16, she was depressed. She was playing video games all day in her basement. And she was talking to two trans-identified people on the other side of the world through the video game, who convinced her that the reason she was upset was because she was born in the wrong body. So at 16, right after identifying this way, she had a double mastectomy and went on testosterone. She almost immediately regretted it. And at 19, detransitioned. But the damage is done. She was struggling to get insurance to pay for reconstructive surgery because they'll happily deconstruct, but they won't pay to reconstruct. Not that you can reconstruct, because breasts, of course, are organs. They're not just pieces of flesh that Johanna Olsen Kennedy says that you can go out and buy some if you have regrets in the future. She literally says that to all these girls who've had chest surgery. She says in a video, you know what? If you want breasts in the future, you can go and get them. That's verbatim what she says. So these are rather hideous people who have something wrong with them, and honestly, they should be rotting in prison for the rest of their lives for all the kids that they've harmed, because they've harmed thousands of them. And the good news is the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles Gender Clinic is now shut down, but Johanna Olsen Kennedy just moved her business up north to San Francisco, where she's working with that surgeon, Scott Mosser, to continue doing this to kids.
They doing those surgeries to kids in Canada?
Yeah, they're doing double mastectomies on kids as young as 14, for sure. National Post has a great article on this. I actually ran into an anesthesiologist at a conference I spoke at near Seattle a few months ago. An anesthesiologist from Vancouver who told me that there's a clinic in False Creek. Now, any plastic surgeon can do these, but this one clinic in False Creek does double mastectomies every day. They do them on women with cancer, of course, and they do them on girls, minors, for gender. And the interesting thing about this is that when they do a double mastectomy for cancer, the doctors pay, never mind all the other costs, but just the doctor's income is $1,500. When that doctor does a double mastectomy on a 14-year-old girl for gender, his income is $3,500,
They
more
get
than double.
paid more. That makes
It's a
zero
different insurance code, it's different pay.
Now, what if I wanted to get my arm or my leg removed and I walked to a doctor and said, I'd like you to take off my arm? Will they do that surgery?
Maybe. That's a condition called apotemnophilia. I'm so glad you asked about this. My friend Mia Hughes from Ottawa has written about this. There was a surgeon actually who had he had a paraphilia, not a fetish. A fetish is something involving a body part. So a sexual perversion not involving a body part is called a paraphilia. And he cut his legs off for this paraphilia. Last year or 2 years ago in Montreal, they actually cut off 2 fingers, the 4th and 5th fingers of a man in Quebec who just felt like his fingers didn't belong. He always felt like his fingers shouldn't be there. Perfectly healthy fingers, some doctor cut them off. So I say maybe. The medical associations did put a stop to this practice of cutting off healthy limbs because we shouldn't cut off people's healthy legs. That's a mental illness, not a physical malady. And that is violating the Hippocratic Oath, which is first, do no harm. But I say maybe because this is Canada, and they'll say, well, if we don't cut this person's leg off, they say they're going to kill themselves, so we'd better do it.
I mean, at least they're being consistent.
I mean, that would be consistent. I mean, it's not really happening, but that again, people get weird ideas in their heads, and if you start doing it, it'll become a contagion, and you'll have a whole bunch of people saying, you know what, my left leg doesn't belong either. I'd like it cut off.
Yes.
Because if humans can think it, some will do it. That's kind of the general rule of being a human being.
It shouldn't be controversial that no child can consent to this. I have a 13 and a 16-year-old. Every day I have the most ridiculous arguments because their train of thinking isn't quite on par with the way that mother thinks. Like, oh, it's minus 30 today. You should probably actually wear a jacket, not just your hoodie. Like, we have these arguments all the time. And we know you can't get a tattoo. You can't drink yet. How we hoodwinked 50% of the population into thinking that this is somehow okay is absolutely insane. And there's
So I'm
obviously
going to just push back on that number because it's not 50%. I get 90% support out on the street. I have overwhelming support. And the surveys that you read, if you call up 1,000 people on the phone and you're working for Angus Reid and you say to them, do you support gender affirming care? Which is kind of how these survey questions go. People don't even know what it is. Some are going to say yes. If you talk to them for 30 seconds and you actually tell them what's going on, they're against it. It's a tiny percentage of the population who understands this and supports it. And it's mostly young women, to be honest with you. And I hate even saying this, but truth is truth and people need to understand it. It's primarily individuals getting indoctrinated through academia. It's women taking these feminist studies courses, which are now called gender studies. All the feminist scholars in academia across the Western world all push this. All the feminist scholars don't know what a woman is anymore. And so all these young feminist types coming out of university, they're not the radical feminist types that you see on Twitter against gender ideology. They're in favor of all leftism. And all leftism requires that we acknowledge that men can be women. And not only can they be women, but that they're stunning and brave. And they're some of the best women. That's kind of how they treat this. So, but honestly, when it comes to this child issue, this is a 90-10 issue. And every politician would do well to speak about it because they would never lose a single conservative vote. All they would do is pick up lefty votes all day long because a lot of people on the left are so done with this. It's not controversial to say that people know that boys are boys and girls are girls, and we shouldn't try to change the sex of children.
So we have a courage problem.
And we have a courage problem and a knowledge problem. I always say it's not so much that people are fearful to talk about this sometimes, that they don't know how to talk about it. Because when you talk about things just in a complaining manner, you're going to get the complaining type of people on board. But most people don't want to hear that. Most people don't want to deal with controversial issues. But when you have a positive message behind things, people are much more likely to get in line with that, which is one of the reasons I always say the positive messages, which is our children are beautiful just as they are. Everyone agrees with that. No drugs or scalpels needed. Absolutely. Thank you. Every parent out there knows their kids are beautiful just as they are. Some are quirky, some are different, some have different personalities. Some boys are more effeminate, some girls are more masculine. But the positive message is there's no right or wrong way to be a boy or a girl. And the most radical leftist cannot disagree with that sentence. I talk to them all the time. They don't really like to talk. They like to yell. But the ones who do stop to talk at all, when I say things like that, which I firmly believe in, because it's true, well, they just get dumbfounded. They come to yell at me. They come to win a conversation, not have a conversation, and now they don't know what to say. So we just need to get educated about this issue so we can talk about it intelligently. And we can talk about the systematic reviews that have been done into this business, which found no evidence to help children. And there are ways of speaking about this without people calling you a bigot. It's just we've allowed this radical 5-10% of the population that scream very loudly to silence us all. And the way we combat that is, yes, through courage, but also through having intelligent conversations.
Yeah, there was a reason why the Tavistock clinic closed.
And it was under a leftist government that they put a permanent ban in place. The Conservatives put a temporary ban in place after the Cass review was done. So Hilary Cass is a pediatrician who conducted this 4-year review, published this 388-page report, which found what all the systematic reviews had found, including some done in Canada, which is that there's no evidence this is helping kids. And of course, the risks are insane. Sterilizing children, cutting off body parts of children. What are we doing? All because a child with all these other issues has been indoctrinated by this really evil ideology. But there's no evidence that any of this pediatric medical transition is helping them. So at first they put a temporary ban in place on puberty blockers in the UK. Then under Labour, a far left government, they put a permanent ban in place on puberty blockers. In Scotland, under a radical leftist government, the SNP, they even put a ban in place on cross-sex hormones. Throughout Scandinavia, they've essentially stopped this. It's still being done in some exceptional cases, which it shouldn't be. And there's no hard ban in place. But they've essentially stopped it. And those are supposed to be the progressive Western countries. The HHS, in the United States, they conducted a systematic review of the systematic reviews and found that this wasn't helping any kids. And we've stopped it there in about 26 or 27 states. And even in the Democrat states, gender clinics are being shut down every week because of pressure from the Trump administration, from the FTC, from the Center for Medicaid and Medicare, which is pulling funding. And lawsuits are beginning now too. So anyone who spends half an hour on this can easily come to understand the truth. And what I find particularly upsetting in Canada is that the politicians won't speak about it. Pierre Poilievre is failing utterly. Total failure. Total failure. Failure as a human being. Forget about politics. You're a father. And this message is for Pierre. You're a father of 2 little kids, one of whom has autism. And it's primarily autistic kids who are falling into this. And you're a leader of a so-called conservative party, and you still won't speak about this. You mentioned it once, reluctantly, at a press conference about Danielle Smith's ban. It's not good enough. All you conservatives have a duty as human beings to stop this, because this is one of the worst child abuse scandals in the history of the human race. It's the worst one in Canadian history, period. And no one will talk about it. Such weakness. It's embarrassing. I don't expect the left to talk about it. But honestly, at this point, I actually do expect Mark Carney to beat Pierre to the punch on this one and to do something about it, even though his own child was affected by this.
I mean, it should be so obvious that this is not okay for kids. What about adults? And, we're seeing men in women's sports. Are we still seeing men in women's prisons? You told a shocking story recently about a man in British Columbia. Could you tell my audience that story? Adam Labuchan.
Yes, a man named Adam Labuchan, when he was still a teenager, he raped a 3-month-old baby who required reconstructive surgery. He later admitted to drowning a 3-year-old boy. And so he was classified as Canada's youngest, most dangerous offender, put in prison. While in prison, he started to identify as a female. So the BC government paid for him to get breast implants, and they transferred him in to the Fraser Valley Penitentiary for Women, which has a mother and infant unit. Mothers in that prison can stay with their children up to the age of 5. And they put this guy right next door to that unit. And he's still in there, where of course he's assaulted a woman.
He's
I
still
told
in
our
there
NDP all
and
about this.
assaulted a woman. Oh my God.
He's a violent person who is a man in a woman's prison. Not just is he violent, he raped a baby. He killed a toddler. They put him in the women's prison where there are mothers with their kids.
There
I told the
are
NDP about this, and they told me that I was making them feel unsafe.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, so there's women and kids are allowed in this prison together. The kids don't just visit the moms; they like live in the
They
prison.
live there. Now, they're separate from the more general population, but it's not like a prison cell. They have, I haven't looked at the exact layout there. I've seen other places like this in Canada.
But it's supposed to be
And they
safe
have little
for-
homes.
Yeah.
There are other women with them with their kids, and they have little kitchens, and they can cook. And
Why would
so
they
it's
put
not like
this
just
man
sitting in a
there?
cell.
And they put this man in the mothers and children's wing.
No, not in his wing, but right beside it.
Yeah, right beside.
Yeah. Yeah. So he could see them.
Oh my God.
I mean, women are not in prison normally for violent crime. They're there for drug-related offenses. They've often been abused and got going down this wrong path in life, and they're not usually in there for violent crime. But then they have to see this guy, knowing who he is, knowing that their fundamental rights as women really are being violated again. Like, they shouldn't have to put up with that. And when I talked to the NDP back in 2020 during our provincial election campaign, I went to Victoria to try to meet with the Minister of Education to talk to him about what is often being taught in our schools, and he wouldn't meet with me. But I walked into their campaign headquarters, and he was campaigning out of there. His name was Rob Fleming, and this woman named Grace Lohr was campaigning out of there, and I didn't know who she was. But she was at the desk where I walked in this little building full of NDP people putting their signs together and stuff, hitting the phones. They were just campaigning. And I started to tell her about all this child abuse going on, everything we've talked about today. I went through it all pretty quickly. And when I got through that, I mentioned this man in this women's prison. And immediately another NDP member shut me down, said that I was making them feel unsafe. 3 times she used those words, and they kicked me out. So I went back the next morning to try to speak to Rob Fleming again. And what was the NDP's response to hearing about all this child abuse, this rapist in a woman's prison? Their response was to hang the transgender flag underneath his political poster outside. So they just doubled down. I've mentioned this true story on Twitter before, and Grace Lohr even responded, and her only response was to say, "I stand with the transgender community." So they don't care. They don't care about the abuses. They don't care how many of these young people end up becoming school shooters. Nothing, no amount of evidence will ever change the NDP's mind. They are the transgender party. They are fully bought into this cult. So therefore, we need the so-called rational people on the other side of the political spectrum, the conservatives and the more moderate liberals, to speak up. But they refuse to as well. Why? Because CBC is going to call them bad names. Who cares? Just be a man, speak up.
That is
Be a
a
woman,
question that
speak
I
up.
had after Tumbler Ridge. Okay, if we're not allowed to talk about it, at what point will the door open to this conversation? Is there a certain amount of shootings? Is there a certain amount of of drowned 3-year-olds or babies getting raped. Like, is there a limit? Then we're able to talk about the dangers of hormone therapy, of SSRIs, of all of this. But I think you
Well, I
just
reject
named
the
it.
idea that we can't talk about it outright. I think people
I
use that as an
know.
excuse.
I
We
mean,
just
these
had a town hall
media.
on the weekend with 600 people there talking about it. And we had this Human Rights Tribunal ruling come down a week or so ago against Barry Neufeld, who was a school trustee in Chilliwack.
Yes.
And I'm going to read you actually from this ruling. So the commissioner actually came out and said, in addition, that statements equating gender affirming support to child abuse may constitute hate speech. So at this tribunal, I read this and then I stated very clearly that gender affirming care, I don't like using those words, but that it is child abuse. I would love nothing better than the Human Rights Tribunal to come after me, so I hope someone files a complaint. But furthermore, in this ruling against Barry Neufeld, they stated, if a person elects not to believe that gender identity is separate from sex assigned at birth, then they do not believe in trans people. This is a form of existential denial. It is not, as Mr. Neufeld argues, akin to religious beliefs. A person does not need to believe in Christianity to accept that another person is a Christian. However, to accept that a person is transgender, and this is the key sentence in this ruling, which I think this ruling is going to be overruled once it goes to judicial review. But it says, to accept that a person is transgender, one must accept that their gender identity is different than their sex assigned at birth. They are saying you have to accept this belief system. You have to think a certain way, or we're going to fine you $750,000. So this violates our freedom of conscience very clearly, which is a charter right, and it violates our freedom of expression. So I expect this to be overturned. And if it's not, to be honest, that would be great. This is already worldwide news. It will become much bigger worldwide news. It will wake up many more people. And this isn't going to last. There's no way this will stand. It's impossible. And, they need to come after people like me and Barry, because I don't care what they do. They can fine me $10 million. It's nothing to me. I'll just declare bankruptcy. It's not the end of the world. But I don't think these rulings will stand. Just as we saw with COVID, a lot of the violations of our freedoms were overturned eventually when they went to higher courts 3 years later. Of course, that never gets the media headlines. But this won't stand, and all this is doing is waking people up, so they're doing us a favor as far as I'm concerned.
I'm really glad to hear that you think that, because that one is something that hit me pretty hard, especially because he was a school board trustee, and we talk about being like more solutions minded. He was doing the work. For him to get
Yeah,
slapped with
and
that fine, I've been worried.
the thing about this is the complaint against him isn't even filed by an individual. It's not like an individual is saying, you hurt me. They actually have in this ruling that the fine is for injury to dignity. Injury to dignity, injury to feelings. Dignity of whom?
Yeah.
There's no one involved. Do you know who filed this complaint? The BC Teachers Federation and the Chilliwack Teachers Association.
Oh my God.
Unions. Who are these unions run by?
Indeed.
Literal communists.
Yeah.
Who is the tribunal run by? Literal communists.
Yeah.
The tribunal commissioner has she, her in her bio on Twitter. And so the tribunal is really just a radical leftist mechanism to punish speech and thought that they don't like. And we're going to get it shut down. If the Conservative Party ever wins again in British Columbia, and they need to get their act together and actually be conservative, because they would have won the last time if they'd spoken out against gender identity leading up to the election. But they didn't. And that cost them 2 ridings just in Surrey, which have huge Sikh populations, where they lost by just dozens of votes. 99.9% of Sikhs agree with me on this issue. I think the only one who doesn't in the country is Jagmeet Singh. And he probably does agree privately, but they have to virtue signal to their NDP people. But this is a huge winning issue. We're going to shut this tribunal down. We're going to close it down, and we're going to eliminate gender identity from the Human Rights Code. That might take a while, but we're going to do it. Mark my words. Bookmark this conversation. Come back to it in 10 years.
What are some of the other legal victories that you're seeing on this issue?
There have been a lot. A young woman named Fox, who detransitioned, just won a $2 million judgment a few weeks ago in New York. That was big. There are about 30 other detransitioner lawsuits in the works. It takes years to get to trial. Chloe Cole now has a court date for next year in 2027. Chloe, of course, had puberty blockers and testosterone at the age of 13 and a double mastectomy at 15 at Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California. And she's been the biggest name among the detransitioners speaking out about this, testifying at state legislatures across the country, and even recently at the European Parliament and the UN Human Rights Council, 2 places I've been as well. But what's going to happen is they're going to keep winning these lawsuits, and the insurance companies are who are on the hook to pay out these lawsuits, not the doctors. Mm-hmm. And the insurance companies will stop insuring these practices. But in the States, we're having huge progress. All over the place, even the biggest hospitals. So the problem with that is if a Democrat wins the next presidential election, they'll undo the executive order of Trump. They'll undo the investigations by the FTC and the DOJ, and they'll start funding these clinics and hospitals again with Medicaid, which right now they're pulling funding. So without a nationwide ban, this won't go away. This will come back when a Democrat will get elected. And they're not going to have Republicans in there forever. It's just the natural order of things. So Congress needs to get their act together and pass a nationwide ban. And to do that, they need to kill the filibuster. Because right now you need 60 out of the 100 senators to go along to pass anything. Mm-hmm. And a simple majority can get it done. All the Republicans have to do is nuke the filibuster. It's a simple process. But they won't do it. And they won't even pass the SAVE Act, which would require ID when voting. I don't get it. You have power. You'd better use it before you lose it. And they're going to lose it. And if the Democrats gain control of the Senate, right away they'll kill the filibuster and they'll pack the Supreme Court with many more Democrat judges. And that would essentially be the end of America as we know it. So there's a crucial time going on right now, and I hope they get their act together. But whatever, we can't control all that. All we can do is have our conversations and control what we can control in our own orbit. So I'm going to keep having thousands of conversations. And I know eventually we're going to put a stop to this child abuse worldwide. It's just a matter of how many kids are harmed before we do.
Now, for having these conversations, you've been assaulted, arrested, you've had bones broken. What keeps you going? Oh, just one.
This is child abuse.
Yeah,
this is the craziest. This is the craziest thing in our life. I can't. Knowing what I know, I can't stay quiet. It's impossible. I started learning about this in 2019, and I couldn't believe what was happening, and I just felt like I had to do something, but I didn't know what I could do. So I was just a normal guy living a normal life. I was a financial advisor, and I had little kids, so I'm just living my life. But they were 8 and 10 when I started this campaign, and then I started traveling across Canada a bit. And now the world, and I just need to keep reaching many more people. I'm close to 1 billion impressions per year now across all the different platforms. But we need to get that up a lot more. I need to get to millions of subscribers so I can educate many more people about how to speak about this issue. And I just know once enough people understand it, we'll put a stop to it. And we are. And sometimes people think it's taking too long. In the big picture, this is happening pretty quickly. Really, no one was talking about this until 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Just a handful of people. And this has become the number one cultural issue of the day on conservative airways every single day. And more people keep learning about it. So we've got a whole lot of people with a basic knowledge, and we need to take that knowledge and get it a little higher. And my strategy with Canada really has been help fix this in other countries, because they'll never lead on this issue. Our politicians are amongst the most cowardly in the world. Mm-hmm. This isn't rhetoric from me. This is truth. I went to Australia to sue their government. They tried to censor one of my tweets. So I ended up in court for 5 days over a single post where I called a woman, and I won. But while I was in Australia, I met with 20 different MPs and senators from 5 different political parties. That doesn't happen in Canada, where I'm from. Only recently have we gotten some politicians on board in BC. So we're making progress here. Dallas Brody's been great. Tara Armstrong, Jordan Keeley, and some of the BC Conservatives are speaking up about this, like Harman Bangu. He seems to be the strongest on this issue, and he's running for leadership, so I hope he wins. Because even in the BC Conservative Party, we still have these old school BC Liberals, the very people who voted for Soji in the first place. And they seem to be leading in the polls. So their time in politics needs to end, and we need a new wave of actual conservatives who aren't afraid to tell the truth, and we need that all across the country. But the problem with Canada is the Conservative Party federally won't allow actual truth tellers into the party. They won't allow the best leaders in who would speak about these issues because they deem them to be too controversial. So it's this vicious cycle. It never ends. But it will end one day, and I don't think Pierre Poilievre stands a chance of winning the next election. They'll get rid of him, and then hopefully they bring in an actual conservative. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that party because it's just inbred in them that they need to be meek and mild and not speak about issues.
Well, and this never should have been a partisan issue to begin with. It's weird how everyone's just really digging their heels in the sand if their side, if their tribe has a certain stance on a certain issue. It's not just the politicians, it's the people. Oh no, this is my team and this is what my team believes. It's insane.
Yeah, and there might be, a lot of times with these political parties, it's their own caucus. It's some of the people in their own party who have a nephew or a niece or maybe even a child that's been transitioned. And so they just avoid it because they're people ultimately. And with all their flaws, they bring those into politics with them. But we just need a few brave truth tellers. But we've had to bypass them. I bypass them every day. I don't rely on them to get anything done. So I'm working with whoever will work with me because this is ultimately a global problem. You can't just fix this in Canada.
No.
You can't just fix it in the US. As long as the UN is pushing it and other countries are pushing it, as long as this theory of gender identity is still at large, it will never go away. This is a global beast. So wherever you can take little chunks out of it, you need to. Because if you weaken it in Denmark, guess what? That weakens it in Canada, just a little bit. If you weaken it in the US, and we have a lot, that has a much bigger impact. But you have to take a piece out of this beast anywhere you can, knowing that in time this will go away. They did lobotomies for a few decades. That was stopped completely. This will stop completely too. But this goes back even before lobotomies. This goes back all the way to the 1920s in the Weimar Republic with Magnus Hirschfeld, who did the first surgeries at his clinic. And those first surgeries, by the way, were done by a man who later served the Nazis in the Luftwaffe and designed hypothermia. He designed hypothermia experiments on Jews at the Dachau concentration camp. His name is Erwin Gorbant. But the founder of this, Magnus Hirschfeld, was friends with a man named Harry Benjamin. Harry Benjamin went on to form the Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association a few decades later, which is now WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. It's all connected. This was dreamed up by just a handful of individuals, popularized in academia by people like John Money and a guy named Robert Stoller, a psychiatrist at UCLA. And this idea was around academia for decades, growing slowly, and then exploded around 2010, 2015, when gay rights were won, because all the money and all these NGOs went to tackling trans rights, and they conflated trans with gay, which is a great deception. And that coincided with smartphones and social media. So it was this perfect storm targeting mainly our girls, although this has increased with boys as well. And it's so huge. It's one of the greatest lies ever told in the history of the human race. It's going to take the rest of our lives to undo this. So people just have to have patience and optimism and just keep going and take whatever victories you can along the way.
After having tens of thousands of these conversations, what conversation tactics work?
Okay, this is easy. I touched on this a bit earlier. So what doesn't work is yelling at people.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Don't do
Yeah.
that. What doesn't work is getting aggressive with people. Bad strategy. Have a conversation. That's what works. Know what you're talking about, first of all. Now, you don't need to know all of it. This ultimately isn't that complicated. But do learn a little bit and have a conversation. Now, the Socratic method is ultimately probably your best bet. This is asking questions and then being quiet, allowing time for the answer to come. People aren't very good at that usually. But if you have someone who's on the fence or is a bit hostile about this, ask them, what is a transgender person? And just pause. Don't say a word. Wait for the answer. You'll find that they can't tell you. Right away, you've already had a great conversation, just with that one question and that pause. Because now you've produced confusion in this person. They might say a dictionary definition. I doubt it. Most people know nothing about this. But let's say they say, well, it's someone whose gender identity is different than their sex assigned at birth, which would be the leftist dictionary definition. Well, that's a circular definition. You ask them what is a transgender person, and they defined with gender identity. Let's get away from this word gender. So then ask, what is a gender identity? Because that's what they gave you. But no one can define that either. They might say, well, it's when your gender is different than your sex. So what's gender? Because we used it as a synonym for sex forever. But if gender is now something different than sex, which is the fundamental belief here, what is gender? What's it based on? And let them try to answer that. And they can't. The only way they can is by using stereotypes. They will say, well, this one woman on the boardwalk in New Jersey told me that, girls like long hair and pink and nail polish. I said, okay, if a boy likes nail polish, does that make him a girl? Of course not. Of course not. They know that. Every radical leftist out there knows that. They would say that's regressive. So what is it then? And they just get flustered and they can't tell you. So right away, you've just totally dismantled their belief system without even offering an opinion. Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman? Did he ever offer an opinion? No, he didn't. He just said, what is a woman? And the dean of women's studies in these universities couldn't tell him. So Socratic method, beautiful. It works. You've got to get these people thinking. Don't just come into this thinking they're evil.
Yeah.
Someone who's pushing trans ideology isn't necessarily evil. Some of them are. But most aren't. Most are 23-year-old gender studies grads. Women's studies is now gender studies. Most are young women, fresh out of university, where they've been lied to. They've been deceived, and they've had their empathy preyed upon. Because they've been told kids are going to die if we don't transition them, and puberty blockers are reversible. And they're told the third argument, what about intersex people? As if there are all these people walking around that aren't male or female. That's another myth that a ton of conservatives have fallen for. Every single human being ever born is male or female. Intersex is an umbrella term for a variety of disorders of sexual development. Different medical conditions. Persistent Mullerian duct syndrome is where males are born with where males are born with a uterus and fallopian tubes. Because they didn't produce this thing called anti-Mullerian hormone, which, in the very beginning stages of our fetal development, we all start growing or would grow fallopian tubes and a uterus. But in males, there's this hormone produced which causes that structure to just disintegrate and get absorbed by the body. And then we grow our male gonads, testes. But there are some men born with testes, but this useless uterus. They're all male. They're XY. They produce normal amounts of testosterone. Or in some of these cases, there's different conditions. But when puberty comes, they're producing testosterone. People like Amain Khalif, that boxer in the Olympics who won the gold medal from Algeria. So he's never named his condition. He has said he has the SRY gene. And we think he has this thing called alpha reductase syndrome. People don't need to know all the terms for this. But his testicles were internalized when he was born. And it probably appeared as though he was female at birth with a micropenis. And so that's terrible. That's extremely unfortunate for him. But at puberty, he developed just like a man, produced testosterone, all that, because he's male. XY chromosomes, he's male. And there are other conditions. Klinefelter syndrome, they have XXY chromosomes, they're male. Turner syndrome, a single X chromosome, female, in all cases. Even Wikipedia will tell you this. So there's no actual hermaphrodites walking around with both sex organs, and conservatives need to understand that because a lot of them push this. Every single person ever born is male or female.
Well,
But leftists like to use...
the Canadian government just paid for a man to have a
Mhm.
penis and a vagina. So now they're actually...
A vagina, yeah. A fake vagina, a neo-vagina. Yeah, they literally paid for this man
I am not paying taxes this year.
who wanted to have a wound created in addition to having his natural business down there.
We paid for that. Taxpayers
And where's there...
paid for that.
I don't want to get into it, but where? Like, there's not really a lot of room. What's going to happen probably, what happens in a lot of these surgeries where they create this neo-vagina for these men, not even trying to like create a new one in addition, but
Yeah.
where they castrate the man and invert the penis, sometimes they develop what's called a fistula, where there's this passageway from their urinary tract into their neo-vagina, and they're literally leaking urine all the time, getting infections, which can kill them. And people have died from these surgeries.
Yes, they have.
And with the young men getting these surgeries today, because they went on puberty blockers, and if your children are watching, you should probably pause this. But the boys' genitals don't grow because of puberty blockers. So they end up with this small penis for life. Not reversible. Okay? We have a window of time in life where we go through puberty. You're not going to go through puberty in your 20s.
No.
And they end up with a micropenis for life. But because they want this surgery done to create this neo-vagina, what they do is they invert it,
That tissue first.
and they need to have enough tissue to work with to get the depth that they want, honestly. It's gross. I apologize. But they don't have the tissue. So they cut out some of the young man or boy's peritoneum, the lining of his abdominal cavity, or they cut out some of his colon to form the lining of this neo-vagina. And guess what? It smells like colon because it's colon. And there's all sorts of surgical complications. That's the norm, not the exception. And several people have died from this surgery, including the second person they ever did this surgery on, back in Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science. This Nazi did the first surgery. The second surgery, they tried to implant a uterus into a man. His name was Lily Elby, and there's a movie about him called The Danish Girl. But he died. So right from the hop, they were 1 for 2, keeping people alive. And somehow this reemerged really in the 60s and 70s. And then they started medicalizing kids really around the turn of this century. And it started in Holland, who developed something called the Dutch Protocol. But they imported this Dutch protocol all across the world and got rid of all the safeguards. And really you have what are autogynephilic men who are attracted to themselves as women, who push this ideology into the culture to try to justify what they themselves had going on. And it's sick.
Imagine if people actually had all of the information, that our institutions were giving the full story, that mainstream media was actually doing its job. Because you would find that even a lot of adults who decided, no, this is still what I want, they would probably make different decisions. Even Matt Ray, whose original stance was never for children. You know, adults can do whatever they want, but never for children. He ended up having such severe complications from the pharmaceuticals that he was on that he was dying, and completely changed his stance. No one should do this. And he never knew that
Right.
that would happen to him later in life.
Yeah, you mentioned what about adults, Chris? I'm totally against it. So medicine. Let's get to the basics here. Medicine is about helping people. Pardon me. Medicine is about helping people, not hurting people. So doctors aren't order takers. If a mentally ill person comes in and says, I want you to cut off my legs, we say no. Well, if a 19-year-old girl
Yeah.
comes in and says, I want you to cut off my breasts because I think I'm born in the wrong body, they shouldn't just treat her like a product
Yeah.
to make money off of. They should be screening for trauma and abuse. They should be looking into other mental health comorbidities. They should be treating mental health problems like mental health problems. And you don't fix a mental health problem by cutting off a body part. So they're not doing that at all. And the vast majority of these cases, if they treated them properly, they would resolve. If this ideology wasn't even in the culture in the first place, which it shouldn't be, these people would never think this in the first place. When I grew up, no one had the thought that they could be born in the wrong body or transgender. It wasn't a thought. It didn't exist. Yes, there were some kids, maybe 1 out of 30,000 back in the 80s, who doctors said had gender dysphoria. And the vast majority of those kids grew out of it. And we know this from all of the academic studies that were done. They're all up on my website, billboardchris.com. There's a spreadsheet you can go to and click on all these different academic studies. The biggest one that was done on 139 boys who they followed into their 20s from a very young age. 87.8% of them grew up and grew out of it. Their gender dysphoria, their distress, desisted. It went away. Mm-hmm. Puberty was the cure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now we block the cure.
Yeah.
Making things worse. Their own hormones were the cure. Growing up was the cure. You don't need to be a doctor to understand this. Mm-hmm. But these were boys who were more effeminate. And this all started in the modern era in the 1960s. The term gender identity was coined by a man named Robert Stoller, a psychiatrist professor at UCLA. And they viewed this as a disorder. These feminine boys, they viewed it as a disorder. They should have just left them alone. And this whole thing wouldn't have started up. But they wanted them to be more masculine. Robert Stoller's genius advice was to have these boys spend less time with their moms. Literally. These are imbeciles who started this. They should have just left them alone. Because all the studies show a lot of these boys grew up to be gay.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Did they have gender dysphoria? Well, what is gender dysphoria? It means you got these boys who aren't as masculine as the other boys and they feel like they don't fit in. Okay. We don't need to pathologize that, actually. Mm-hmm. You don't need to give it a label. Life's not fair. Some kids don't feel like they fit in. We want to help them fit in. We don't want to bully them. We want to find things that interest them. We want to find things in life that help them to thrive. And we want to tell them they're perfect just as they are. You asked what are some strategies for talking with these people pushing this? Say things they agree with that are true.
Yes.
Our children are beautiful just as they are. There's no right or wrong way to be a girl or a boy. An effeminate boy is still a boy. What else are you going to call him? Mm-hmm. He's a boy. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually don't want men competing. I actually don't want men on the Minnesota Vikings dancing like girls with the women on the cheerleading squad. I don't like that. I don't think we need to see that. I'd rather not have that. But they're still men.
Yeah. He's a pretty good dancer, too. I've seen that guy.
Good dancers, but they're still men.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Pretending that people are something they're not. This whole thing is a lie. It's the emperor's new clothes. It's exactly that. We're pretending people are something they're not. And we're saying you're not kind if you don't play pretend.
Yes.
Well, this game of pretend is leading to children being maimed and sterilized, being turned into anorgasmic lifelong pharmaceutical patients. Because we haven't even touched on this yet, but the former president of WPATH, who just left the position a couple of years ago, a man pretending to be a woman. In all these places, you have men pretending to be women or women pretending to be men running these medical organizations or heavily influencing them. It's cult members deciding what medicine should happen. It's activism driving medical bodies. Mm-hmm. But this guy, Marcy Bowers, he admitted in a video that none of the boys who started puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, that's the beginning of puberty when you first get your pubic hair, none of the boys as adults have ever had an orgasm. So they're destroying future adult sexual function of children who can't even understand what that means. Just another thing to add on to the list of abuses that this is doing.
And that's something that I think a lot of supporters of the trans ideology don't consider. Again, if it was a choice that you wanted to stick with lifelong, you're removing their ability to even have the proper surgery that they would need, that they potentially want, the ability to have kids later in life, obviously, and then the ability to orgasm gone. I
And
don't
way
think that's
more problems. Cancers, heart disease.
sepsis.
The,
Yeah.
the WPATH files that were released, these are internal documents from WPATH and videos. Doctors are admitting that this woman who was on testosterone for 8 to 10 years, she developed hepatocarcinomas. This is liver cancer because of the testosterone. She died shortly thereafter. We have some studies showing it's causing a lowered IQ. Even a study in sheep showed cognitive impairment from this drug, these puberty blocking drugs. This same drug, by the way, the exact same drug, is given to pedophiles to chemically castrate them before they're eligible for parole. In certain states, and even in Canada, this is done. Same drug. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, sued, citing, I think it was the 11th Amendment. I could be wrong about that, but citing the US Constitution, saying that it was cruel and unusual punishment to chemically castrate pedophiles. The same ACLU is in court suing to give this drug to children. Our world is upside down.
Totally upside down.
And these trans activists don't have anything. They have nothing to talk about to support this, which is why their only tactic is screaming and violence, because they know that that'll shut up a lot of the population. And they have propaganda, and they know that when they say, oh, you're anti-LGBTQ, that strikes fear in the hearts of so many men and women. Mm-hmm. Well, what are we doing? We're going to let some people screaming stop us from protecting kids? My message is always to the men, to be honest with you. You gotta stand up and find your manliness a little bit more, because it's totally pathetic if you as a man are afraid of talking about this. It's pathetic. You got to find your man card, because you've lost it if you're too afraid to talk about this. Let them call you whatever they want. Who cares? Mm-hmm. But they conflate this with being gay, when in fact it's the most homophobic movement in history. Mm-hmm. In Iran, now I know things are going to change there very soon. Hopefully that regime is overthrown. They've got to go. But because of the first Ayatollah, Khomeini, he issued a fatwa that it was okay to be trans. So all the gay men to stay alive in Iran, because being gay is punishable by death, they transition. They get the surgeries. Iran is the number 2 destination in the world for sex reassignment surgeries for men, after Thailand, where they have all the ladyboys involved in the sex industry.
I had no idea. It's a survival strategy. Whoa.
It's a survival strategy. They had 8 men on the women's national soccer team about 10 years ago. We do this here in the West, and we call this inclusion. It's targeting a lot of homosexuals, but they want to conflate it with homosexuality. It's hurting them. Yeah. But it's just all confusion and propaganda. Really, the only men I ever have to worry about are the gay men. They will attack me sometimes. When I see a big, strong guy walking down the street, though, I never worry. Ever. Ever. They all agree with me, except for a small component of some gay men will have a problem with me, but they'll usually just walk by. So people got to stop being afraid and just stand up and speak up, because this is about educating the population. So get educated, and then one conversation at a time, keep spreading it.
And you might face consequences. You're gonna get kickback. Who knows? Maybe you lose your job. But are you? You know, everyone's up in arms about Jeffrey Epstein right now, about sacrificing children. We're sacrificing children right now for our.
This is
own
far worse.
Yes.
This is far worse than. Look, I'm not going to compare 2 bad things.
Yeah.
This involves hundreds of thousands of children that are identifying this way. This involves tens of thousands of children who have been physically harmed. and are being harmed today. Epstein's dead. Today, like what's happening in Britain is way worse than Epstein. And it's all bad. But like let's focus a little bit here. The rape of Britain, tens of thousands of girls being raped by Pakistani Muslims, the police involved covering it up. Probably in many of those cases, Pakistani Muslim immigrants who joined the police force. Pakistani Muslim cab drivers transporting them from A to B. There are so many things going on in the world right now that people aren't talking about. But we want to focus on certain stories. We talk about in Canada the reconciliation industry, this hoax about all these murdered Indigenous children, starting in Kamloops in 2021, where they apparently discovered the graves of 230 murdered Indigenous children as young as 3 years old, buried in a mass grave. That's what the Washington Post reported. That children as young as 3 years old were found in a mass grave. Washington Post. No bodies were ever discovered and have not been discovered to this day. The whole thing is a hoax. Yet we put aside billions of dollars and we have all these politicians virtue signaling for the Indigenous community, giving our land away. Just this week, all of Greater Vancouver now has some Musqueam Indigenous title over all that land, done by the federal politicians. But guess what? There are kids in that community being harmed today by this. In British Columbia, one psychologist who worked for the Ministry of Children and Family Development named Wallace Wong said at the Vancouver Public Library at a talk he gave that he was transitioning more than 500 kids in the ministry. 500 kids in state care. And there are only 6,000 kids in state care in BC. 8% of all the kids in state care in British Columbia were being transitioned by this one psychologist. He does the social transition, the indoctrination, the new name, the new pronouns, the affirmation of this delusion. He sends them to the BC Children's Hospital where they are then medically transitioned. Surgeries, drugs, hormones. Well, guess what? In state care, 68% of all those kids are Indigenous in BC. So it stands to reason that they're harming Indigenous kids today, sterilizing Indigenous kids today, and nobody will talk about it. The politicians 50 years from now will talk about it. They'll fly the flag at half-mast for what happened 50 years ago, but they won't talk about it today. So priorities are all messed up.
How do you not get blackpilled doing the work that you're doing?
We're winning all over the place. All over the place. We're stopping this. And we just tell the truth and we keep going. There are always going to be injustices in the world. There's always going to be terrible things going on in the world. It could be a lot worse. Many countries are worse. The Iranian government just slaughtered 30,000 of their own people a couple weeks ago. Killed them. For what? For wanting to be free. For wanting to go outside where you can show your hair. So our civilization is still a lot better than those ones. And I take issue with the people who say Canada needs to, let's just worry about ourselves, right? Okay, that's fine. Well, it's actually okay to worry a little bit about other people too. My family's not affected by this child abuse at all. My kids are thriving. They get straight A's. They understand it perfectly. My daughter even started a group at her school, a discussion group where 60 or 70 kids come every week. And they even talk about Christian issues. They talk about whatever they want. That's in public school. So there's so much blackpilling about public schools. It's your job as a parent to raise your kids. And you can raise your kids in such a manner that the bad stuff that goes on in schools isn't going to affect them as much. You have that ability as a good parent who's in touch with your kids. Now, I get that some situations are different. Especially if your kids have autism, you need to be much more on the ball because they're particularly vulnerable and falling for this. But no, there's lots of reasons to be blackpilled, and there's always reasons to look for the good. There's always going to be good and evil in the world. So you can focus on the evil, or you can try to do good to stop the evil. And you just got to do that.
You brought a lot of really powerful stories today, stats. I feel like we don't even need stats for this argument, but the evidence is really stacked in your favor. But you've said one clear message that I think we could hopefully get everyone on board with. And that's children are beautiful just as they are. You're perfect as you are. I wish we could just get on board with that same message. I think maybe it's possible.
It's 100% possible. We're going to do it. And we just do it by repeating it and getting that word out there. People instinctively know this. Parents know this instinctively. And so this ideology that's been forced into our society with billions of dollars of propaganda behind it is going to take a little bit of time to defeat, but we are defeating it. And we see that in the crowds that we get out on the street. I was in Ottawa in 2021. In the morning, there were 300 protesters just for me, 300 against 1. I went back there 2 years later and it was 500 against 500. And we just had the biggest town hall in Canada since the federal election here in British Columbia, just on this issue. The biggest one in Canadian history just on this issue. It's not easy to get 600 people to come out to a town hall in Canada. But we did just for this issue because there's nothing more important to parents in this world than their kids. And this is an assault on our kids. So I know people look for reasons why they can't do something. And you know what? You don't need to get fired from your job to speak out about this. Sometimes you need to keep your job because you need to feed your family. And I understand that. But when you look for reasons of how you can do something, you'll find those. If you look for reasons you can't, you'll find those too. But it might be that what you can do is just support me or support Carla. That helps. Mm-hmm. I lose tons of money doing this. I've lost 120 grand just the last 2 years alone. So if people want to support me, they can do so through billboardchris.com. But there's always something you can do. You can write to your MP. You can speak about this respectfully with your school's principal. Mm-hmm. No one's going to fire you from your job. There's a lot of things you can do. You just need to think about it and try to do this in a respectful manner with facts behind you, and you're just going to win all day long. So thank you so much for having me, Carla. I appreciate it.
Chris, thank you for the work that you do. I love your tenacity above all else, and I think that's going to inspire a lot of courage in other people too.
I hope so. I'm sure it will, and one day we'll get there.
Where can people find you?
Social media, Billboard Chris, X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at Billboard Chris, billboardchris.com website. It's a bit old, but it's still got some good stuff on there, and they can support me through there. And then I started a nonprofit as well in the US. So go to wespeaktruth.com, and you'll find some more resources on there as well. But really, just follow me on social media. That's the best place.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Listeners, definitely check out the show notes. I'll link everything up there. And I hope this inspired some courage in you to go have those conversations. Sandwich board, optional, but at least get out there and have some of these talks that actually matter.